Yo boys, DDB here. So the war wind's closing in, you guys might be wondering what some of the strongest specs would be to main. Well, I'm going to be going over my opinion on the top 3 melee specs today, going into the war wind. It's going to be based on Mythic Plus and raiding. Mainly going to be looking at the damage output of these specs, but we will note things like the utility, etc., as those attributes are also what makes specs strong. Small disclaimer as well, this could all still change in the coming weeks, leading up to Season 1. So in third place we have Windwalker Monk. Windwalker's gone into the war with him a large overhaul to its talents and how it plays. It now scales extremely well with haste rather than before, where it kind of didn't scale with anything, and it felt like it needed a buff every season in order to keep it from being completely trash. So currently Windwalker's looking very promising in the raiding scenarios, excelling very well in single target and doing pretty well inside of cleave scenarios. I think too game breaking, but it's definitely there. As usual, the damage is coming from Rising Sun Kick and their Fist of Fury, alongside their Blackout kicks, with higher teaching and the Monastery stacks. For Mythic Plus, I would say that it's pretty good as well. Not top tier by any means, somewhere a bit above the mid tier, like to the highest tier sort of. I expect this to be even better though going into the season, and as it progresses, as they'll be getting a lot more haste gear, allowing them to help up like the dry spells that they currently have where they're not able to generate enough chi due to their energy being quite low. For the majority of their AoE damage, it's going to be coming from, as usual, their Fist of Fury and just Spinning Crane Kick. Monk has some very good buttons to press for defensive situations, which is with their Touch of Karma. That is an absorb damage that will throw back damage to the target um, up to a certain percentage, and then Diffuse Magic, which is a 60% damage reduction to magic and can remove certain magical debuffs upon use. Thought Brew is still there as well and can be used for extra max HP. You can also use this offensively with Touch of Karma and your Touch of Death for a little bit more damage. For the utility, monks like every other melee have a 15-second cooldown for their kick. They have a leg sweep for an AoE stun, their Ring of Peace which can be used to knock targets back and prevent them from reaching you. You also have a paralysis for a CC, can be used for a small stop on a target, or for a hard stop, depending if the target's far enough away and no one's hitting it. And then finally you have Detox for a poison and a disease dispel. For the hero talents, both Conduit of the Celestials and Shadowpan are looking very strong, Conduit giving you an extra button for a high damage channel effect, while Shadowpan's a bit more passive. That'll be buffing your damage and giving you increased stats. So overall, with its changes and its hero talents, it's looking very promising going into the war within. For our second place, we have Assassination Rogue. So Assassination, alongside a lot of the overroad specs from the majority of the beta cycle, were quite underwhelming, but as of recent they've received quite a hefty amount of buffs to help them out. And Assassination currently is looking like a go-to pick in the M+. They focus around bleeding as many targets as possible, and using their Death Marking Kingsbane cooldown on a large HP target. Then all the damage they do to this target will also be cleaved onto anything around it with a talent called Caustic Splatter, which was something that they gained in the last season of Dragonflight. The big thing that makes them strong currently inside of M Plus is the combination of talents that allow them after leaving stealth to hit extra targets with their bleeds, like their Garrote and their Rupture, which is their two main bleeds. Every time you finish off a pack, you'll be able to get a re-stealth, and you're able to do this on pretty much every pack. So you'll kind of bleed all the targets going in with a bunch of Garrotes and Ruptures, and then you kind of leave combat, and you can just keep doing it and doing it again. As long as the packs aren't living too long and you have to start like manually putting Ruptures on things, which I'm not sure is going to be the play. We'll have to see, but yeah, as long as it's not living too long, you should be fine. Even if it does, you just also have your Vanish that will allow you to keep the bleeds up on a pack that's going to live long if you know that's going to happen. So not just for the actual bleed damage itself, they also gain a lot of energy back from their bleeds doing damage, which makes their rotation feel a lot more fluid, unlike the single target where they kind of feel like they're having to wait around for energy. For single target situations like raiding, they're pretty up there as well, with strong high burst and very good execute. I wouldn't say that they're top tier inside of like raiding scenarios, but they're definitely up there. PI is also something that's going to be very good on them, like previously, which will make them even stronger. This is because of the cooldowns that they have, with a 2-minute cooldown on Deathmark and a 1-minute cooldown on Kingsbane, which is two of their cooldowns that are very bursty. Once again, specs that usually have profiles like this with high burst do very well, allowing them to snipe ad spawns, or gain massive benefits off damage amps that bosses will have. For the defensive, rogues are quite top notch as well, with Feint allowing them to remove a large portion of the AoE damage that's going to be coming to them, and this can also be used fairly frequently. They have Cloak of Shadows, which allows them to immune all magic damage effects, which is obviously very good for a short. It's only for a short amount of time, but it's still there. And then finally, they have Cheat Death, which is probably one of the best things that a class can have. For their utility, rogues will mainly look at locking down a single target with their kidney shots and cheap shots for big stuns. They do have an AoE stop with their blind, which is a talent, but the only thing bad with this is it's quite a long cooldown. And of course, finally, they'll have a kick on a 15-second cooldown. For their hero talents, they're both pretty passive to be honest, and won't affect your gameplay too much outside of some cool visuals and some RNG. So yeah, very strong pick in my opinion, sort of the opposite of what Windwalker is, being a lot stronger in M+ than raiding. Um, but as it's just currently so good in M+, I just feel like it deserved the second spot. Finally, for the number one melee spot, this goes to Arms Warrior. Honestly, it's quite a hard decision in my opinion going into this, as also Fury Warrior is doing very well. So both the DPS specs for Warrior are looking really fantastic, but because I didn't want to put two of the same class on here, I had to go with one, and that was Arms Warrior. So if you guys have been playing pre-patch, you would know that Arms Warrior is a powerhouse currently, crapping on pretty much any class outside of like BM Hunters maybe, but they were sort of bugged anyways. And then, fortunately for them also, they're going to be getting even stronger going into the War. So first let's look at why I think this deserves the number one spot. First, Arm's single target damage is what sets it apart from a lot of other melee. It has very strong sustained damage with its high hitting mortal strikes that hit like trucks, alongside its overpowers. It also has its bleeds with deep wounds and its rend, which allows it to do good sustained damage. Its cooldowns did get nerfed going into War, so it's not strong there with its cooldown department anymore, but they're still pretty good. But for arms, its purpose has always been once the target hits 35%, and it's able to start using its executes a lot more often. It's enabled to keep up rend permanently inside of execute without having to spend the rage or the global cooldown to press rend. And what the rotation turns into instead is you pressing two executes into a buffed mortal strike. I will say arms sort of needs Sky Fury buff from the Shamans once it hits execute to be able to keep slamming its executes. Otherwise it does run dry on rage and has to press a lot more overpowers than it would want to. In a raiding scenario, you're pretty much always going to have a shaman inside your group, as long as you're in a guild group that's organized. But yeah, their execute is still the strongest part of the spec and will always be super strong inside of any progression setting for raiding, as bosses generally will just get harder as they get lower, meaning execute's more valuable. Inside M+, they're also pretty good, with a lot of the damage coming from Cleave. They have Blade Storms as well, and again, their bleeds, alongside their Thunderous Roar. Hero talents complement their damage even more with two options, one being Slayer and the other Colossus. Slayer will focus more on their executes, allowing them to use them more often, and they'll be buffed, doing more damage. And also another part of the spec is they can use their Blade Storms a lot more often, and they will also be doing more damage. The other being Colossus, giving you an extra button called Demolish, which deals a crap ton of damage to a single target and then cleaves to anything around it. So two different playstyles, one where you'll be like an execute god, and the other allowing you to have very strong high priority damage with Demolish. For the defensives, warriors still have access to the defensive stance, which is a slight damage reduction, however this will also reduce their damage. So you won't want to keep this on at all times. You have Spell Reflect for magic damage, and can be used sometimes to deal massive damage back to the actual target that's casting the spell on you. They also have access to Die by the Sword, allowing them to parry 100% of the attacks coming their way and reduce all damage by 30%. And you can also cheese a lot of like mechanics with bosses or any sort of trash packs that are doing like a hard hit on the tank. You can kind of taunt it, die by the sword, take the hit, and then the tank taunts back, and that's it, done. They also have access still to ignore pain, allowing them to gain an absorb shield for some of the damage they're about to take, but this does cost rage. Their utility is slightly better going into the War Within, allowing them to take Shockwave a lot easier for an AoE stun, Stormbolt for a single target stun. They have Intimidating Shout for an AoE stop, and then of course they have a kick on a 15-second cooldown. So yeah, overall arms with its damage toolkit I feel is pretty far ahead of a lot of the other melee at the moment. Like I said though at the start, I still feel Fury is really strong and up there, so keep your eye on that spec as well. So yeah guys, that's my take on the top 3 melee specs going into the War Within. I'm going to be continuing to upload the War Within content once it comes out, So stay tuned for that, and I'll also be streaming on Twitch once the Wolverine releases. So yeah, come say hi. But as always, hit all that good stuff, like, comment, subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.